Number 1. Inconsistent stories. When someone's story doesn't quite line up, that's a red flag. And we're not just talking about a little slip-up here and there. This is when the details don't match up, or they change dramatically when retold. It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle where pieces don't fit, no matter how hard you try. If you're hearing something that feels off, your gut will likely start buzzing. It's a good sign that the person might be hiding something. Let's break this down. Imagine someone telling you something and the details seem a bit sketchy. But, instead of clearing things up, they start to throw in more specifics. At first glance, it might seem like they're offering clarity. But upon closer inspection, the extra details only make things more complicated. And here's where the trick comes in. Over time, the person might slip up and tell you something that completely contradicts what they said before. It's subtle, often. They might not even realize they're doing it, but to you, it's like a pattern emerging. Inconsistent stories don't just pop up randomly. There's usually some sort of pressure, internal or external, driving that inconsistency. Maybe they're trying to keep track of all the lies, or maybe the truth is just too complicated for them to keep straight. Either way, when you start noticing that one part of the story doesn't match another, it's like a mental alarm going off. You've probably heard the phrase "truth has a ring to it." It's pretty accurate. When someone's being honest, their story tends to feel smooth, like a consistent flow. The facts don't contradict themselves. But when someone's spinning a tale, that flow can break down pretty easily. The more you poke, the more those contradictions come to the surface. What was once a clear picture starts to look like a messy canvas. Maybe they said something last time that they now seem to forget, or worse, their recollection of events has shifted dramatically. That shift is a sign. What makes this particularly interesting in the context of Stoic philosophy is that these inconsistencies in stories often reveal more about the speaker than about the actual events. A person who can't keep their story straight might be hiding something deeper, something they don't want to confront, even if it's just a matter of pride. The Stoics believed in cultivating honesty, not only to maintain integrity but also to live in harmony with the truth. When someone's story keeps changing, it's a reminder of how easy it is to slip into dishonesty. The effort to maintain a facade can wear someone down, leaving them vulnerable to slipping up. Inconsistent stories are more than just a momentary misstep. They're a clue into someone's inner world. The more disjointed the narrative, the more likely it is that there's something to hide, whether it's an emotion, an insecurity, or a deeper truth they're unwilling to face. At the end of the day, the Stoic approach would be to remain calm, observant, and clear-headed when faced with such inconsistencies. Notice the gaps, ask questions, but don't rush to judgment. In time, the inconsistencies often speak louder than any story they try to weave. Number 2. Avoiding eye contact. The classic sign, shifty eyes. We've all heard about it, right? Someone who can't meet your gaze might as well be holding up a neon sign that says, "I've got something to hide." But here's the thing, it's not always that straightforward. Avoiding eye contact doesn't scream liar every time, it's more subtle than that. It's like trying to catch a breeze, you feel it, but you can't quite see it. Let's unpack this a little. First off, why would someone dodge eye contact if they're lying? Think about it, eyes are windows to the soul, or at least that's what poets and romantics have been saying forever. When we look someone in the eyes, there's this unspoken connection, a rawness that feels, well, exposed. A liar? They don't want that exposure. The eyes might betray their intentions, so they play it safe. Look away, avoid the intensity, and maybe, just maybe, they won't get caught. But it's not just about being exposed. There's also the pressure. When you're lying, your brain is running a marathon. You're crafting a story, managing your body language, monitoring the other person's reactions. It's a lot. And holding eye contact? That's one more thing to juggle. For some, it's just too much. So, their gaze dances away. They look down, glance to the side, or suddenly find the floor tiles incredibly fascinating. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Some people naturally avoid eye contact, whether they're shy, nervous, or just introverted. It's their baseline behavior, and it doesn't mean they're lying. Others, especially seasoned fibbers, might overcompensate. They lock eyes with you like a hawk, almost daring you to doubt them. Creepy, right? That's why it's important not to rely on this sign alone. What you're looking for isn't just the lack of eye contact, it's the way it happens. Does it feel unnatural? Does it come at odd moments, like when you're asking a simple question? Are they blinking more, fidgeting, or looking everywhere but at you? Liars aren't exactly smooth operators. There's often a rhythm to their avoidance, a jittery kind of energy that feels off. And then there's the timing. Pay attention to when they avoid your gaze. If it's during a critical moment, like when they're explaining a discrepancy or answering a pointed question, it's more suspect. It's like their eyes are trying to escape the weight of their own words. But let's not become paranoid detectives here. People are complex, and not every averted gaze is a smoking gun. Instead, think of avoiding eye contact as one piece of a larger puzzle. Combine it with other signs, tone of voice, body language, the coherence of their story, and you'll have a clearer picture. In the end, it's about trusting your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. So, keep your eyes open, literally, and don't let anyone pull the wool over them. Number 3, nervous body language. When someone's lying, their body often betrays what their words try to hide. Nervous body language is like a flashing neon sign, screaming, something's off. But you've got to know how to read it. The thing is, our bodies tend to react instinctively when we're under pressure, especially when we're trying to keep a secret or spin a story. Those reactions? They're usually subtle but oh so revealing if you know where to look. For starters, let's talk about the fidget factor. People who are lying often can't seem to sit still. Their fingers tap the table like they're playing some invisible piano, or they might suddenly develop a fascination with their jewelry or the hem of their shirt. It's almost as if their hands need to stay busy to distract from the untruths spilling out of their mouths. But hey, not everyone fidgeting is a liar, sometimes they're just nervous in general. Context is everything. Then there's eye contact, or, more accurately, the weird dance liars do with their eyes. They might avoid looking at you altogether, as if your gaze could pierce through their fabricated tale. On the flip side, some overcompensate and stare you down like they're in a contest, thinking, if I don't blink, they'll totally believe me. Both extremes can be dead giveaways. Natural eye contact flows effortlessly, forced eye movements, not so much. Speaking of unnatural, pay attention to their posture. Are they suddenly rigid, like they're bracing for impact? Or maybe they're shifting around, almost squirming in their seat. It's as if their body is trying to physically escape the situation. Lying creates tension, and that tension has to go somewhere. Often, it manifests in awkward movements or stiffness. Let's not forget about facial expressions. Lying isn't just about words, it's also about controlling emotions, or failing to. A forced smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. That's suspicious. Or maybe their expressions don't match the tone of their story, like laughing nervously while telling you something serious. The face can't always keep up with the lie, and those micro-expressions can spill the truth faster than words. One overlooked clue is how someone uses their voice when they're lying. Nervous body language isn't just about gestures, it's about the entire package, voice included. Do they clear their throat a lot or suddenly need a sip of water? Is their tone shaky or overly steady, like they rehearse their lines in the mirror? These small quirks often accompany the physical signs. Here's the thing, everyone's nervous tells are different, but the common thread is inconsistency. When their body language doesn't align with what they're saying, it's like catching a glimpse of the cracks in their story. The trick is to trust your gut and observe without jumping to conclusions. Spotting a liar is part art, part science, and a whole lot of paying attention to the details others miss. Keep your eyes open, it's all there if you're looking. Number 4, excessive details. Have you ever noticed someone going overboard with details when they're telling you something? They start adding every little piece of information, like they're trying to prove something. At first, it might seem like they're being thorough, but soon enough, you start to wonder if they're just trying to cover up something. It's as if they're trying to overwhelm you with the sheer volume of information, hoping you'll get lost in the sea of specifics. It's not the kind of thing that's necessarily true in every case, but when someone is lying, they often feel the need to sprinkle in excessive details to make their story sound more believable. It's kind of like when someone explains something in such detail that you feel like they're trying to convince themselves just as much as they're trying to convince you. Instead of just telling you what happened, they start describing every tiny aspect, from the texture of a table to the exact moment the sun was setting. And it all seems a little too much. Why does it matter how many people were in the room, or exactly how the wind was blowing at the time? It's these little extra bits of information that don't actually move the story forward but seem to serve a purpose, distracting you, making the whole thing sound more legitimate than it really is. Now, there's nothing wrong with giving details. Sometimes the more information, the clearer the picture. But when the story starts to feel more like an intricate novel rather than a simple recounting of events, something's off. It's almost as though they're trying to make you think, wow, they must be telling the truth because they know so much. But here's the thing, the truth doesn't need that much support. If it's real, it stands on its own. Lies, on the other hand, often need padding to hold up. In the Stoic mindset, this tendency to over-explain and overcompensate can be seen as a sign of a deeper fear or insecurity. Someone who's lying may feel the need to cloak their words in so much extra fluff because they're afraid that without it, the truth of the lie will be too obvious. The Stoics taught us to value simplicity and clarity. When faced with unnecessary elaboration, it's an opportunity to pause and ask why someone feels compelled to go down that rabbit hole. It's almost as if their mind is working overtime, crafting a web of information that doesn't really add up. The more they keep layering on, the more distracted you become, and before you know it, the truth is buried beneath all the extra words. Instead of having a direct and clear answer, you're left with a convoluted mess of details that almost feels like a performance. It can even start to feel exhausting to keep track of what's real and what's exaggerated. And here's the kicker, often, the more unnecessary details someone includes, the more likely they are to slip up. The more you weave a web, the more threads there are to get tangled. Inconsistent details creep in, things that don't quite fit the narrative, and the original story starts to get buried in the complexity. In those moments, it's easy to lose sight of the simple truth. In a way, excessive details are like an emotional smokescreen. The more they talk, the less you're focused on what matters, the essence of the story itself. The Stoic would approach this situation by stripping away the fluff, seeking the core of what's being said, and refusing to be swayed by the unnecessary distractions. A lie, after all, doesn't need all that extra noise to stand on its own. It can be exposed by simply asking the right questions, and letting the truth speak for itself. Number 5. Changing the subject. Have you ever noticed how some people have a magical ability to steer conversations away from uncomfortable topics? 1 second, you're asking a question, and the next, you're talking about the weather, last night's dinner, or the meaning of life. It's almost impressive, almost. But when it comes to lying, this little conversational pivot is less about charm and more about dodging accountability. So, why does a liar change the subject? Simple. Lies are like fragile little bubbles, too much poking, and pop. The truth comes spilling out. When someone feels the heat rising, their instinct might be to cool things down by redirecting your focus. It's like they're saying, "Oh, look over there," while they quietly tiptoe away from the fire. The trick is to notice how and when the subject changes. Is it abrupt, like slamming on the brakes? Or is it smooth, like slipping through a side door? A liar might suddenly blurt out something unrelated or hit you with a question to put the spotlight back on you. They could even toss in a joke or some light banter to derail your train of thought. Anything to keep you from digging deeper. But here's where it gets interesting. It's not just what they change the subject to, it's how they do it. If someone genuinely shifts topics, it feels natural, right? But with a liar, there's often a hint of panic beneath the surface. It's like they're running out of air, desperate to escape. The change might feel rushed, awkward, or even clumsy. That's your cue to pay attention. And don't forget the timing. Liars love to switch gears at critical moments, when questions get too specific, details don't add up, or they feel cornered. It's their way of saying, "Let's not go there," without actually saying it. Sometimes, they'll even try to make you feel like you're the one being unreasonable for asking. A bit manipulative, isn't it? Now, you might be thinking, but doesn't everyone change the subject sometimes? Sure, we all do. Life's messy, and conversations flow in weird directions. The difference is intent. A liar isn't just moving on for the sake of the conversation, they're dodging responsibility, avoiding scrutiny, and protecting their story from falling apart. It's a defense mechanism, plain and simple. So, how do you handle it? Stay sharp. When the topic changes, don't let it slide. Gently guide the conversation back. Ask your original question again, maybe with a slightly different phrasing. Watch their reaction. Do they stumble, hesitate, or get defensive? Or do they manage to come up with something that sounds too rehearsed? Those are the cracks where the truth hides. Ultimately, changing the subject is just one piece of the puzzle. It's not a foolproof sign on its own, but when paired with other red flags, it's a strong indicator something isn't quite right. Stay curious, stay calm, and trust your gut, it's smarter than you think. Number 6, defensive reactions. When someone's lying, they often react defensively, as if being questioned threatens their very existence. Defensive reactions are a dead giveaway because they reveal the inner turmoil of someone trying to protect their story, or themselves, from falling apart. Here's the thing, lying is stressful, and that stress can trigger behaviors that scream, "I'm hiding something," even when their words try to say otherwise. The first clue is how quickly they go on the offensive. You ask a simple question, and suddenly it feels like you've accused them of a crime. Instead of calmly addressing what you're asking, they might get snappy or act insulted, as if your curiosity is some grand betrayal. This exaggerated reaction can feel like they're trying to flip the script, making you the bad guy for even daring to ask. It's classic deflection, a way to shift the spotlight away from their lie and onto you. Another tell is over-explaining. Defensive liars often think that more details will make their story airtight, so they pile on unnecessary information. It's like they're trying to preemptively answer every question you might ask, but in doing so, they trip over their own web of words. Ironically, the more they talk, the more suspicious they seem. Real truth doesn't need a lot of filler, it stands solid on its own. Tone is another giveaway. Ever notice how a defensive person's voice can escalate? Maybe they suddenly raise their volume, as if yelling will make you believe them more. Or perhaps their voice gets sharp and clipped, like every word is loaded with irritation. It's not just what they say, it's how they say it. Defensive tones often feel like walls going up, an invisible barrier to keep you from probing further. And let's talk about body language again, because defensiveness shows up there too. Crossed arms? That's the universal stay out signal, whether they're aware of it or not. Or they might lean back, physically distancing themselves from the conversation, as if that could also distance them from the truth. Sometimes, they'll use over-the-top gestures, like throwing up their hands in frustration, to dramatize their indignation. It's all about creating a smokescreen so you focus on their reaction instead of the lie. Then there's the shift in focus. Defensive liars love to flip questions back at you. You ask something straightforward, and suddenly, they're grilling you instead. Why are you even asking that? What's your problem? It's like a magician distracting you with one hand while the other hides the trick. The goal is to derail the conversation and make you question yourself instead of them. But the real key to spotting defensive reactions is noticing the mismatch. If their response feels way bigger than your question deserved, it's worth paying attention. Genuine people tend to stay calm, even when they're misunderstood. Liars, on the other hand, often crumble under the weight of their own story, and their defensiveness becomes their biggest tell. Stay sharp, it's all in the details. Number 7, speech hesitation or stammering. Have you ever noticed someone hesitating mid-sentence, or stammering when they're telling you something? At first, it might just seem like a little awkwardness, a casual pause while they gather their thoughts. But when you dig a bit deeper, it could be a sign of something more, something they don't want you to catch on to. Speech hesitation or stammering is one of those little tells that can give away more than the speaker intends. When someone is telling you a story, especially if it's a lie, their brain is working overtime. They're trying to remember all the details they've fabricated, make sure everything aligns just right, and at the same time, keep their emotions in check so they don't give themselves away. All of that mental juggling can create a bit of a bottleneck in their speech. Their brain knows the truth, but the lie doesn't always flow as smoothly, so there's a lag, a hesitation, a stammer, a shift in tempo or tone. It's almost like they're trying to pull the right words out of thin air, but they're not coming fast enough. You see, when we're telling the truth, the words tend to flow pretty naturally. It's like they've already been organized in our minds. But when we're lying, we're not just speaking, we're also trying to control our body language, keep our emotions in check, and maintain a story that doesn't fall apart. It's mentally taxing. So, we might pause to think about what to say next, or even struggle to get the right words out, as if the brain can't quite make the connection. That pause or stumble, whether it's a split-second hesitation or a few drawn-out seconds, might be a sign that the story isn't quite as smooth as it should be. What's interesting, and especially relevant in Stoic philosophy, is that hesitation in speech can reveal a lot about a person's internal state. Stoics believed in cultivating inner peace, emotional control, and rational thinking. Lying, of course, goes against that ideal. If someone is hesitating while speaking, it could mean they're wrestling with their own internal conflict, trying to reconcile the lie they're telling with their deeper sense of truth. They might feel guilty, anxious, or even uncertain about what they've just said, and that shows up in their speech. When we hesitate or stammer, it's a signal that something isn't flowing right. And it's not always a conscious act. Sometimes, the mind just can't keep up with the lie. In Stoic terms, this is a clear reminder that lies disrupt the harmony between thought and speech. A liar's hesitation isn't just a sign of nervousness, it's an indication of an internal dissonance. They might be trying to maintain control over a narrative that doesn't align with their values, causing this disconnect in their speech. The real trick, though, is not to jump to conclusions too quickly. Sure, hesitation can be a clue, but it's not definitive proof on its own. People might pause for any number of reasons, to gather their thoughts, to choose their words carefully, or simply because they're not sure how much to say. But when it becomes a pattern, when those pauses stretch out too long or the stammering becomes more pronounced, it's time to dig deeper. In those moments, trust your instincts, but also strive to remain calm and measured, just as a Stoic would. After all, the goal isn't just to catch someone in a lie, It's to navigate the situation with clarity and understanding. Number 8. Unusual vocal pitch or tone. Ever notice how someone's voice can betray them before their words even do? It's wild, really. The way we speak, our tone, pitch, and even the rhythm, can act like a megaphone for what's going on inside. And when it comes to lying, a person's voice often gives the game away before their story even starts falling apart. But why is that? Let's dig into it. Picture this: lying is stressful. The brain is multitasking like crazy, fabricating details, keeping the story straight, scanning for your reactions, and all the while, trying not to blow it. That stress doesn't just stay in the head, it spills out into the body, especially the voice. You might notice someone's pitch climb higher, almost like their voice is straining under the weight of their words. Or maybe it gets weirdly low, like they're trying too hard to sound calm and in control. Either way, it's a red flag waving in plain sight. But it's not just about pitch. The tone matters too. Lies tend to come with a kind of nervous energy that's hard to hide. There's a tension you can almost feel, even if you can't quite put your finger on it. Maybe their words sound clipped, like they're rushing to get through it. Or perhaps there's an odd hesitance, a strange rhythm that doesn't quite match their usual way of speaking. It's like the voice itself knows something's off and is struggling to keep up. Then there's the volume. Sometimes liars get louder, almost as if raising their voice will make their words more believable. Other times, they go super quiet, shrinking their voice like they're trying to disappear from the conversation. Both are signals to watch for, especially if it doesn't match the situation. It's like their voice is trying to distract you, to steer you away from noticing the cracks in their story. Of course, not every vocal quirk means someone is lying. We're all human, and voices can fluctuate for a million different reasons: nerves, excitement, even how much caffeine they've had that day. The key is to notice what's normal for them. If their voice suddenly shifts in a way that feels out of character, that's when your inner detective should perk up. Here's the fun part: liars sometimes overcorrect. They know they're being watched, or at least feel like they are, so they try to control their voice. They might rehearse their tone, aim for steady, even pitch, or deliberately slow down their speech. Ironically, this can make them sound even more unnatural, like a robot trying to act human. It's almost too perfect, too practiced, and that's where the unease creeps in. At the end of the day, unusual vocal pitch or tone isn't the smoking gun, but it's a strong piece of the puzzle. Combine it with other signs: fidgeting, dodging questions, avoiding eye contact, and you'll start seeing the bigger picture. Trust your ears. They're sharper than you think. And when something doesn't sound right, don't ignore it. Number 9. Contradictory statements. Contradictory statements, one of the juiciest signs someone might be lying. When people lie, they sometimes get tangled up in their own stories, and the details they're trying so hard to control end up slipping through their fingers. Lies are hard to maintain because, unlike the truth, they're not grounded in reality. And the more elaborate the lie, the harder it is to keep every piece of it straight. Here's the thing: lies often come with inconsistencies. At first, they might sound convincing, but as the conversation rolls on, cracks start to appear. Someone might say one thing and then later contradict it without even realizing it. For example, they'll confidently claim, "I didn't even talk to them that day," and then, just a few minutes later, casually mention, "Oh, when they called me earlier, wait, what?" The story doesn't line up, and that's your cue to dig a little deeper. One reason this happens is that lying requires a lot of mental juggling. Unlike telling the truth, where everything naturally aligns because it's based on actual events, lying is like creating a puzzle where none of the pieces actually fit together. People trying to keep up a false narrative often forget what they said earlier. It's like they're improvising on the fly, and eventually, they contradict themselves. The more they talk, the higher the chances they'll trip up. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Not all contradictions are big, obvious ones. Some are so subtle you almost miss them if you're not paying attention. Maybe their tone changes when they explain something, or a minor detail, like the time something happened, suddenly shifts. At first, it might seem innocent, but when those little inconsistencies pile up, they can paint a much bigger picture. Lies tend to unravel when you start pulling at the loose threads. One tricky thing to watch out for is how they handle being called out. If you point out a contradiction, do they double down and try to explain it away with an even more convoluted story? Or do they get flustered and try to change the subject? Both reactions are red flags. Honest people will usually pause, think about what you've said, and try to clarify. Liars, on the other hand, tend to panic and scramble to patch up their story, often making it worse in the process. What makes contradictions so powerful as a tell is how they disrupt the flow of trust. When someone's statements don't match up, it creates a subtle sense of unease. You might not immediately know what's wrong, but your gut tells you something's off. That's your cue to listen closely and start connecting the dots. Lies thrive in the shadows of confusion, but contradictions shine a light on what's hidden. So, the next time you hear someone's story take a weird left turn, don't brush it off. Ask questions. Pay attention to the gaps and overlaps. Lies are like poorly stitched fabric, they can only hold together for so long before they tear. And once they do, the truth is usually not far behind. Number 10. Unnatural facial expressions. Have you ever caught someone's face twitching or freezing up in a way that just didn't feel right? Maybe their smile didn't quite reach their eyes, or their frown lingered a little too long, like they were trying to force it. That's what we're talking about when we refer to unnatural facial expressions. When someone is lying, their face sometimes betrays them, even if they're trying to keep a poker face. The human body, particularly the face, has a way of revealing emotions that can't always be controlled, and if someone's lying, their expressions might seem just a little off. Now, don't get me wrong. Our faces are incredibly expressive. A raised eyebrow, a slight twitch of the mouth, or the way our eyes widen, these are all things we do naturally when we experience genuine emotions. But here's the kicker: when people are trying to lie, those natural reactions can become exaggerated or misaligned with what they're saying. It's almost like they're trying too hard to mask their feelings, which only ends up making their expressions more obvious. For instance, let's say someone is telling you a story and they're forced to smile to look convincing. But if that smile is too wide, or if it doesn't fade naturally, it can give them away. A smile that feels forced can feel like it's sitting on top of their face, not part of their genuine emotion. Eyes can do the same thing. They might dart around more than usual, or they may stay unnaturally still. It's a telltale sign that they're struggling to match their facial expressions with their words. It's like the face is in a tug-of-war between what it's actually feeling and what the person is trying to project. When someone's nervous about lying, their facial muscles can't seem to make up their mind about what to do. The result? An expression that just doesn't feel authentic. If someone's trying to look calm but their lips tighten in tension, or they nod a little too quickly when agreeing with you, it's a sign that they're trying to force an emotional response that isn't really there. Their facial expressions, whether exaggerated or stiff, break the illusion. Here's where Stoic philosophy comes in. Stoics believed in mastering one's emotions, practicing self-awareness, and aligning actions with virtue. A true Stoic is someone who's at peace with their emotions, who doesn't feel the need to put on a mask or pretend to be something they're not. So, when someone is lying, it's almost like they're engaging in a little internal battle. They may want to project confidence or calmness, but deep down, they're conflicted. Their face, however, can't keep up with the emotional tension. It betrays them. What's interesting is that most people, even if they're skilled at lying, don't have full control over these involuntary reactions. They might think they're fooling you with a story, but their face is sending a completely different message. A raised eyebrow, a fleeting flash of doubt in their eyes, or a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. It's all part of the silent conversation happening between you and them. As a Stoic, the key is to stay observant. Look beyond the words and pay attention to what their face is really telling you. After all, the face doesn't lie as easily as the words do. But, like any clue, it's not always a slam dunk. Facial expressions can shift for all kinds of reasons: nervousness, discomfort, or just the pressure of a conversation. The trick is to notice the subtle discrepancies, the way their expression doesn't quite match their message, and to stay calm and measured in your response. Because, in the end, it's about peeling back the layers, not rushing to conclusions. Just as the Stoics would suggest, find peace in your observations, and let the truth reveal itself over time. Number 11, fidgeting or unusual gestures. Have you ever noticed how some people's bodies seem to have a mind of their own? It's like their hands, feet, or even their whole posture starts betraying their thoughts, especially when the truth is bending a little too far. Fidgeting and strange gestures are often the silent whispers of the body trying to cope with the mental chaos of lying. Let's dive into why this happens and what it looks like. First, think about what happens when you're under stress. Your body doesn't just sit quietly while your mind works overtime, it reacts. A liar's brain is juggling a ton, crafting the lie, remembering what's been said, scanning your reactions, and trying not to blow it. That stress has to go somewhere, and often, it leaks out through their movements. A tap of the foot, a shift in posture, fingers playing with a random object, it's all their body's way of burning nervous energy. But here's the thing, not all fidgeting screams, "I'm lying." Some people are just naturally fidgety. They're the type to tap pens, twirl hair, or bounce their knees all day long, even when they're being 100% honest. What sets lying apart is the unusual nature of the gestures. It's not about the fidgeting itself, it's about how and when it happens. Is it different from how they usually behave? Does it spike at certain moments, like when you ask a direct or tricky question? That's where the clues hide. Sometimes, it's not even about small movements. Larger, more dramatic gestures can also signal dishonesty. A liar might wave their hands around more than usual, as if trying to distract you, or themselves, from what they're saying. Or maybe they suddenly fold their arms, put their hands in their pockets, or rub the back of their neck. These gestures can feel oddly out of place, like they're shielding themselves or trying to find some comfort amidst the discomfort of lying. Then there's the classic, touching the face. It's almost a reflex for some liars. A quick scratch of the nose, a brush against the lips, or even rubbing the eyes, it's like their hands are trying to hide the truth spilling out of their mouths. But why? It might be an unconscious effort to block their own words or to channel the tension bubbling up inside. Either way, it's worth noticing. Of course, none of this is foolproof. Some people fidget when they're nervous, shy, or even just bored. It doesn't always mean they're spinning a tall tale. The key is context. Watch for sudden changes. Does someone who's usually calm and composed suddenly start fiddling with their watch or shifting in their chair? Or do they freeze up entirely, their movements becoming stiff and mechanical? Both can be signs that their mind and body are out of sync. At the end of the day, gestures are like breadcrumbs. They won't give you the whole truth, but they can lead you in the right direction. Pair them with other signs, tone of voice, evasive answers, or inconsistencies, and you'll start to see the bigger picture. The body has a funny way of betraying the mind, and when it comes to liars, those little movements can speak volumes. So, pay attention. The truth is often hiding in plain sight. Number 12, avoidance of direct answers. Have you ever asked someone a straightforward question and gotten a response that left you thinking, wait, what? That's not what I asked. That's what avoidance of direct answers looks like. It's one of the more subtle signs of dishonesty, but once you catch it, it's hard to unsee. Liars love to dance around the point, throwing in fluff, tangents, or vague replies to keep from giving a simple, straight answer. Why? Because answering directly risks exposing the truth, and that's the last thing they want. Let's break it down. When someone's avoiding a direct answer, they're usually stalling. They might repeat your question back to you, like they need time to come up with something that sounds believable. Did I leave early? Well, it depends on what you mean by early. See what they're doing there? It's not an answer, it's a smokescreen. They're buying time, hoping you'll either get distracted or move on. Sometimes, it's not about stalling but about burying the truth under a mountain of words. Liars might ramble on, giving you way more information than you ever asked for. You ask a question that should take 5 words to answer, and suddenly you're getting a mini lecture. Oh, I was busy with this thing, and then there was traffic, and after that, I ran into so-and-so. By the end, you're not even sure what your original question was. It's all a tactic to keep you from noticing they never really answered. Another way people dodge direct answers is by flipping the script. Instead of addressing what you've asked, they might fire a question back at you. Why do you even want to know? Or what's the big deal, anyway? Classic deflection. Instead of focusing on their own response, they're trying to shift the focus onto you. It's a clever trick, but if you're paying attention, it's easy to spot, and it's a major red flag. Vagueness is another hallmark of avoiding direct answers. Liars often steer clear of specifics because details can be checked and verified. If they're being intentionally vague, it's like they're leaving themselves an escape route. Phrases like, I think so, maybe, or probably pop up way more often than they should. They're trying to stay non-committal so they don't get pinned down later. What makes this behavior so telling is how unnatural it feels. When someone's being honest, their answers flow. There's no hesitation, no overthinking. But when they're avoiding the truth, you can sense the gears turning in their head. They're working hard to keep their story straight, and that effort comes through loud and clear. The next time you ask someone a simple question, pay attention to how they answer. Are they clear, confident, and direct? Or are they dodging, deflecting, and drowning you in unrelated details? Truth has a way of standing tall, while lies tiptoe around the edges, hoping you won't notice. Trust your instincts, they'll often pick up on the avoidance before your brain fully processes it. Number 13, overly rehearsed responses. Have you ever had someone respond to a question so perfectly that it almost felt like they were reading from a script? Like their words came out too smoothly, too polished, as if they'd practiced them a dozen times? It's one of those signs that someone might be trying a bit too hard to make their story sound convincing. Overly rehearsed responses have this unnatural rhythm to them, something about them just doesn't feel genuine. It's like they're too ready with the answer, almost as if they've anticipated your question and already planned how to respond. And when you sense that, it's like a little warning bell goes off in your mind. The thing is, we all think on our feet when we're being honest. Genuine thoughts, honest responses, they flow from our minds naturally. Sure, you might stumble a bit, maybe take a moment to gather your thoughts, but overall, it's fluid. There's an organic quality to it. But when someone's preparing to lie, especially if they've done so before, they often rehearse what they're going to say. They've mapped out the conversation in their mind, and they've practiced the response they think will make them sound convincing. The result? A response that's just a little too smooth, a little too rehearsed. The problem with this is that it's often a dead giveaway. While they might have memorized the story, the tone, and even the timing, there's something off about it. Their words may sound perfect, but their delivery often falls flat. It's like watching an actor deliver a line that they've memorized. There's no spontaneity, no real emotion behind it. It's almost as if they're reading a script instead of engaging in a real conversation. When we're being truthful, we don't have to rehearse, it just comes out. But when someone's lying, they're essentially acting, trying to deliver their lines just right, and that effort can slip through. From a Stoic perspective, the whole idea of rehearsing responses goes against the essence of their philosophy. The Stoics believed in being in tune with the present moment and responding from a place of wisdom, not from a script. They emphasized the importance of clarity, simplicity, and honesty. To be truly virtuous, you must speak with integrity, not through premeditated words designed to manipulate or mislead. So, when you hear someone deliver an answer that feels rehearsed, it's almost like a signal that they're not in touch with the truth. They're too focused on the performance, on saying the right thing, rather than being open, transparent, and honest. What's fascinating is that, despite how rehearsed someone's response might sound, the more they try to control their answer, the more they risk overcompensating. It's like they're trying too hard to make their story stick. And sometimes, that extra effort creates subtle inconsistencies. Maybe their tone shifts a little when they hit a certain detail. Or perhaps they hesitate just for a second too long before delivering the perfect response. These little slips can reveal cracks in the facade, cracks that would otherwise be hidden if they were simply being honest. The key here is to listen carefully. People who are lying may sound convincing at first, but if their response feels too clean, too rehearsed, take a step back. The Stoic approach would be to remain calm, stay present in the moment, and not get swept up in the performance. The truth, after all, doesn't need to be rehearsed. It simply is. And in time, it's the unscripted, natural answers that shine through as the most genuine. Thanks for tuning in. Spotting deception is a skill that can protect your peace and guide you to make wiser decisions. Remember, as a Stoic, the goal isn't to confront every lie but to respond with clarity and composure, staying true to your principles. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Share this with someone who could benefit from sharpening their perception. And as always, focus on mastering yourself, because no lie can disrupt the truth of a disciplined mind. Stay calm, stay aware, and keep building your inner control. See you in the next video.